Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. I know that October's already gone for 2019. Now we're in the middle of November. Well, a couple of days in November. And I wanted to go ahead and make a video, since I have all of these things fresh in my head, of my top 5 Goosebumps books to read at Halloween time. And basically all of these are going to be Halloween themed. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, it just does to me. I'll probably do the same thing with Christmas if there's like a top 5 of those, or top 4, or whatever there is. I don't think there's many Goosebumps books in general that take place at Christmas time. But anyway, that's not the point. So, I read pretty much everything. The only book that I did not read from Goosebumps Halloween selection was the TV book of Attack of the Jackolanterns, which is next to impossible to get my hands on. But even so, I do have some runner-ups, some things that are more modern that I do really dig, that I don't want to talk about yet, but I will comment later on in the video, just because I don't want to spoil the list. A lot of the list is filled with older books, which some are out of print, some are not. So, you know, we'll get there when we get there. But this is, like I said, my top 5, and it's not so much that I base this on scariness, right? What I base this most on is what feels the most nostalgic for me, even though I didn't grow up on all these books. Most of these books I didn't even read until, like, this year. So what really gets to me, what feels in the story itself more like Halloween and feels like that fall and October time of the year, what captures that best out of the Goosebumps book series? That's really what we're looking at here on this video, so I want you to know that ahead of time while the video starts. Anyway, for the first book that I have, it is actually a short story collection. It is Still More Tales to Give You Goosebumps, Special Edition number 4. This is a collection of tales, and these are short stories that are like 10 and 15 pages long each, about 10 stories in total from the bottom of the book, and these are some of the best Halloween-themed stories that I've read in Goosebumps. Most of these are Halloween stories. I think maybe 1 or 2 are not Halloween-themed, but there's some really good ones in here that I really like a lot. The book itself I gave a great review to if you want to check it out here on my channel. I have it on the Tales to Give You Goosebumps playlist here on my channel, or you can just type in Michael GoosebumpsFan, Still More Tales to Give You Goosebumps. Some of the best stories in here were like Pumpkin Juice, which is really cool about some pumpkin juice that they did a little thing to, and it started changing some people, including our main characters. Attack of the Tattoo was really cool about tattoos that were getting stuck on people and they couldn't get them off. You had things like The Scarecrow was a really cool story. I dug that a lot. A lot of people would think that's probably not as creative as I thought it was, but I thought it was a pretty cool story in general. The Goblin's Glare was really cool. Bats About Bats was a pretty decent story from what I remember. Yeah, my number 5 pick. I think that it might bother people the fact that my list is mostly filled with older books. This is one of the ones that are coming out around the time that the original 62 classic books came out in the 90s. So this is relatively older, but it's still really good. I'm really thankful I got to read this year and talk about it here on the channel. Anyway, my number 4 spot, I only have the reissue cover of this. I recently, like in the last couple of weeks, read this, and I really dug it until the ending. I thought the ending was a little messy, a little not as good or satisfying compared to the rest of the book, but this book flies by. It's really engaging. It's very short. It's about 110 pages. It is Goosebumps, a classic book, by the way, Attack of the Jackolanterns. I love this cover reissue, by the way. Very cool looking cover. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of the original book itself from the original 90s run, because it looks awesome, with the kids walking up the street with their trick-or-treat bags and the pumpkins on their heads and all that stuff. Really cool book. I don't want to tell you too much about the plots of these books. Basically, this one is focused on a bunch of kids who want to get back at some children who basically pranked them 2 years previously. Then the Halloween following that big prank that those kids pulled on our main characters, the kids set up a whole bunch of pranks to prank those 2 kids that pranked them, and the kids didn't show up. They called and said they weren't even coming. After all this work these kids put into this prank for like a whole 3 or 4 months, maybe even 6 months. So this is the current year where these kids are planning on, they're going to get these 2 kids that pranked all of them so badly 2 years previously, they're going to get them back. And they're going to make it mean, you know? And all of a sudden these 2 tall people with jack-o'-lanterns for heads show up, and nobody knows where the voices are coming from when these jack-o'-lanterns speak or anything like that. It's really weird, really fun, really eerie story. Even in this book, and the previous book, my number 5 choice, it doesn't capture the feeling of Halloween too immensely, not like the further choices in my top 5, but it does pretty well, especially with the whole trick-or-treating aspect. Everybody in America who got to experience this as kids, we all know what that feeling feels like, just tirelessly running around all the time, grabbing door to door, grabbing candy, bags of candy. Sometimes you get that house that has bowls sitting out in front of it that tell you to only take one piece, and you sit down and start digging. It happened, man. Trick-or-treating was fun stuff back in the day, and this video, or this particular book in particular, I would say, focuses a lot on the trick-or-treating thing, which is pretty cool, in my opinion. It works pretty well for the most part for a book. Pretty cool concept. I like the concept for the most part. I like the villains with the pumpkin heads. Anyway, what is my number 3 pick? That would be Goosebumps Series 2000 Headless Halloween. This was so good. This was so good and nobody gives it enough credit. I really dug this. I think it does such a good job of capturing what Halloween feels like and just that eeriness. Basically, our main character in this book likes to scare people by putting his head tucked into his shirt and startling people. And he gets into a situation where he falls into a ditch, like a really, really deep ditch, like off of a cliff. And when he climbs back up, he finds himself in this really weird town. People are acting really weird in this place. They start daring him to do stuff. They take him to this really creepy Halloween party and stuff. By the time you get to the finale of this book, you realize how good this book actually is, in my opinion. I really dug Headless Halloween. I thought it was a really solid book that most people don't talk about for whatever reason. Again, that capturing of the feeling of Halloween and trick-or-treating, not even so much trick-or-treating, just the feeling of Halloween night itself. It's so well done here, it just shows the talent that R.L. Stine has if he wrote this one. I don't know if he wrote this one or not, but if he did, if it's true on the cover that he wrote this one, it feels like Halloween, and it brings you back to this really crazy nostalgic place, especially if you're somebody like myself who grew up on a lot of Goosebumps and a lot of Twilight Zone and just things like that. This has a very dark tone to the whole story overall, and it's actually kind of surprising by how much more mature it is than most Goosebumps books. It's a lot darker than most of them, honestly, and even the finale, the ending itself, is pretty surprisingly dark itself. I really dug that about it because I love dark books and dark movies and all kinds of stuff. Headless Halloween is totally a home run for people who love Halloween and people who love just darker Goosebumps books in general. This is really, really good. I think you'd love it if you haven't read it yet. Yeah, Series 2000, number 10 is what it is. So my choice for number 2 on my list of top 5 Goosebumps Halloween books is going to be very controversial with my number 1 pick as well. Number 2 is The Haunted Mask from the original classic series. This is book number 11. I really like the book. I think it has a lot of eeriness to it. It captures Halloween in such a special, creepy, fantastic way. A way that even Headless Halloween doesn't capture it, honestly. It captures, and a lot of this book is focused on everything from decorations to picking out a mask to costumes to candy to terrorizing other trick-or-treaters if you have a scary costume and they don't. There's so much of a focus on that. If you're somebody like myself who dressed up like Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers and all these different characters when I was growing up at Halloween time, there's a lot of memories to be had with this book that you never had before, because I didn't read this until this year as far as I know. I think I might have started reading it at one point. I think I read it last year, and that was it. But I mostly grew up on the TV episode adaptation, and this book was just great. Everything from the main character, Carly Beth, who is the most lovable, human, random main character that Goosebumps has ever had. Carly Beth is amazing. You just can't help but love that character and fall in love with how sweet and just innocent she is, and how she wants to get back at Chuck and Steve for always being mean to her, the bullies that are supposed to be her friends, but they're always trying to scare her because she's very much somebody who's afraid of everything, and people take advantage of that all the time. And there's all this stuff like with her mom, who's into arts and crafts, making this creepy like head that looks exactly like Carly Beth's own face and head. And just how that implies into the story is so eerie. You know, there's so much to this book that really feels like Halloween, especially in the 90s. You know, the Halloween days now, in 2019 and in the last 5 or 10 years, nobody decorates anymore. No one dresses up anymore. We don't have trick-or-treaters at our house because every parent is scared to death of having their kids poisoned or killed or kidnapped or raped or anything like that. Honest to God, I don't blame them the way people are now. But it's not like the 90s. This feels like the 90s Halloween. For anybody in the future who wants to study what Halloween celebrations were like for previous generations, this is what we 90s kids felt like, and early 2000s kids. But still, it still stands, the fact that this is what Halloween was like for us. It was great. This captures it so well. I could not recommend it enough. It's pretty much always on people's like top 5 and top 10 lists of Goosebumps books in general. Not just Halloween books, but just Goosebumps books in general, because it's so good. My number one pick, it's going to be very controversial, especially with my last pick, like I said. That would be Goosebumps number 36 from the classic series, The Haunted Mask 2. The direct sequel to that first book I just showed you for anybody who doesn't know. This book basically picks up with Steve, one of the bullies that picks on Carly Beth all the time from the first book. This is a year later, and Steve actually wants to be just as scary and find a scary mask that is scarier than what Carly Beth had in the previous year and all the struggles she went through with this whole mask coming to life and attacking her and stuff. He ends up going to the same shop that she got hers, and he doesn't really know that it's the same shop, but he ends up going there. And he sneaks down to the basement with Steve, or with Chuck, his buddy, and he finds a mask of an old man, right? And he puts it on, just like on this picture here. And it gives him a lot of the same troubles, but not exactly. With Carly Beth's mask from the first book, it was just mean. It made her mean and angry all the time. It just, a red rage would just take this girl over. In this book, it's an old man mask, so you can kind of figure out what it would be, all the challenges and problems that he goes through in this book. Now, I love the TV episode. I've seen the TV episode adaptation from the old 90s show 1,000 times growing up. Loved it to death. One of my favorite things ever from the Goosebumps TV show. Both of the Haunted Mask episode two-parter things are. But this book in general, not only does it capture the feeling of Halloween so well, maybe not as well as the first book, I think, for the most part, but by the time you go through all of the things Steve has to go through in this book, and then you get to the finale, I'm going to tell you honestly, I said this in my review as well, the finale of The Haunted Mask 2, the solution to the book that I won't spoil for you here, don't worry, that scared me so bad. I don't know what it was about it. Just something about that finale sticks with me and it creeps me out just thinking about it. There is just something scary about that book, and there's just something very Halloween-y about the book. It just feels like fall throughout that book. There are moments of Steve just falling asleep with the mask on that are just unnerving. They just come across like a Nicholas Winding Refn film would if he ever adapted this for whatever reason. It is such an eerie book, and it feels so much like Halloween, and I love it. I love everything about it. So like I said, guys, that's pretty much my top 5 list for the scariest, well, probably not the scariest, but the top 5 Goosebumps Halloween books for me personally. I recommend all of them. I think all of them are very good. I think that pretty much every Goosebumps Halloween book, for the most part, is good. Some of my runner-ups that I talked about earlier. Trick or Trap. Trick or Trap from the Most Wanted series, not the Give Yourself Goosebumps book, which I ranted about on my channel not too long ago. A couple of weeks ago I talked about that, and it was a mess. Anyway, Trick or Trap, the Most Wanted book, I really dig. The two kids find a wooden mask. It kind of transports you when you put it on to another reality. That was a really creative, fun book. A very slow book, though, and it doesn't really focus too much on Halloween either, so that's why I didn't really include that in this list. I wanted to. I actually have it sitting right here to the side of me because I was going to put it in the list, then I decided not to. Another book that really got me that I could not recommend enough, even though I recommend Trick or Trap, a particular Halloween book that I thought was very, very good, is also a Most Wanted book. It's a special edition Most Wanted. I think it's book number 4 of the special editions for Most Wanted. It's called Zombie Halloween. I did a review for this very early on my channel, probably in February or March of this year, 2019, something like that. And that book was so good, and it had a lot going for it. It had some gorier moments, especially in the prologue to the book too. It has to do with a tunnel running underneath a main character's house and stuff. There happens to be zombies down there. The grandfather in the book actually keeps wandering out in the middle of the night into the cemetery across the street from the house. Very just creepy book. I mean, a lot of atmosphere. Very, very scary book, and honestly, I don't know how many young readers should read that, honestly. The finale I thought was really, really good. I really love the finale of it, as a matter of fact. It's the very end, like the last chapter of the book, that I thought was a little off for me. But for the most part, Zombie Halloween was amazing as well. So was Trick or Trap, I would say. Really, really, really good books. There's not really anything else I want to recommend right now off the top of my head for Halloween books. But that's pretty much it, guys. What did you think about my list? What did you think about my runner-ups? All that stuff. What is your list? What would you do for your list? Your top 5, your runner-ups, all that stuff. I'd love to know all that down below, guys. Thank you so much for watching and sticking through this video of me rambling about all kinds of stuff. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope maybe next Halloween you can get your hands on all these books and maybe read them then, since I didn't have this video up until November of 2019. Anyway, Thank you guys. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.